Okay, this tutorial is about when we're given a graph, we're going to write an equation and we're also going to create a table of values. One quick review here, we've got rate of change. It's from the equation y equals mx plus b, and rate of change is always going to represent our m in that equation. So we've got rate of change, which is m. M means slope, or how steep a line is. We've got rise over run, which is also the same thing, and change in y over change in x. Also reviewing here initial value. So from our equation y equals mx plus b, that is our b value. And so our initial value here, it's the same as the y-intercept, and that's where the line crosses the y-axis. When we're looking at a table, it is our 0 row, and if we're looking at a graph, it's the point 0, comma b. And so here we're going to be given a graph, and we want to write an equation of our line. So remember, an equation of our line is going to be represented as y equals mx plus b, and remember that m is represented as rise over run. So that's one thing that we need to find from our graph. B is also going to be the place where the line crosses that y-axis. So we need to find those two pieces of information so that we can move forward. So the very first thing that we can notice here about our graph is where this line is going to cross the y-axis. And so I know right now that my b value is at 1. That y value where it crosses the y-axis is a 1. The other thing I can do is I can find my rise over my run, and it doesn't matter whether I connect this point and this point, or I connect this point and this point up here, or I connect this point with this point clear up here. They're all going to give me fractions that will simplify to the same thing. So I will start here, and I'm going to rise, and I'm going to run, and I notice that I have risen 2, and I have run 3. So my m value, or my rise over run, is a rise of 2 and a run of 3. Once I have these two values, I can go ahead and write my equation. Y equals 2/3 x plus 1. So go ahead and look at this graph, give it a try, see if you can write the equation, hit pause, and when you're done, go ahead and hit play and see if you have gotten it correct. So we're looking for our m value, our rise over run, and we're looking for our b value, which is our y-intercept, or where it crosses the y-axis. So the first thing I notice is my y-intercept right here. That crosses at a value of 2. My rise over run, if I go from my point to my point, is going to be a rise of, here's 2 units, and then 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have risen 6, and I have run from here over is in the negative direction, -3. So I have a rise of 6, a run of -3, and that is going to simplify to -2/1. And so I can write my equation. Y equals -2/1x plus 2. And we have our equation. This time, if we're given a graph, can we create a table of values? And so the great news about this is that anytime they give us the points on the graph, they have just given us a collection of x values and y values that will go right over here into our table. So I'm going to start with our negative numbers first, and I'm just going to plot them into the table right as they appear from my graph. So the point -3, -1 translates right over here to my table. I can do the same thing then with my point 0, 1, and then 3, 3. Now, notice that there's an extra set down here. It wants us to keep going. So if we keep going with our pattern, I notice right here I have added 3, and over here I have added 2. If we just keep going with that same pattern, we will have more points that we can put on our graph. And so if I kept this line going, I noticed that this point right up here would be the point 6, 5, and it is certainly on our graph, on the line of our graph, and there we go. So go ahead, take a moment, hit pause, work on this, create a table of values, and see what we can come up with. Okay, if I take the points that are on my graph, I can go ahead and make a table. And now, this point right here, even though it's not technically on our graph, we know that it goes through right there. We also know that this point right here is going to be on our graph. It crosses the x-axis right there. So that is the point 1, 0. And then I've got the point 2, negative 2. And so this time we were given enough points. And if you didn't happen to do that and you found your pattern here, you might have noticed that every time this increases by 1, this decreases by 2. And so any pattern that you found along that stretch would have worked just as well. So had we needed to find another one down here, I would have a 3, and I'm going to subtract 2 over here, and I would have had negative 4. So another point that would be on my line, if I kept going, would be down here at 3, negative 4. And you can see that if I made my point right there, certainly that line, if you extended it further, would go through that point. So again, I want to talk about the graph equation table relationship and how everything matches up here. Okay, so from my graph, when I do rise over run, I see that I have 2 over 3. So my rise over run right here is 2 over 3, and that's represented on my table by adding 2 to my y values, my change in y, and I would add 3 and my change in x. So everything is still represented here. On my graph, my y-intercept, or my initial value here, is a 1, and that's represented right here by my b value in my equation. And on my table, that's represented right here with my 0 row. So again, everything is related between graphs, equations, and tables, and they tell us all the same information.